Okay, good morning everyone. So today I'm going to explain you about teaching listening. This is an important skill that we are going to check about how it is involved in the learning language and in the language learning and how it the process of this listening is developed. So first of all, we're going to check that during teaching listening, we are going to check first of all the background about some 5 reasons that Kathleen Galvin tells us about why it's important or why we consider listening. The first one is to engage in social rituals, to exchange information, to exert control, to share feelings, to enjoy yourself. So, in short words, in order that you can communicate and you can understand the meaning that someone could uh, share you. So, we're going to check that McDonald and Shell mentioned that listening it is considered as a classroom activity or could be considered. Well, when you apply listening, you can check that the classroom activities will be focused on the great range and variety of input, which is going to help you to be conscious about what is the input that learned could be into, well, could be in touch and could understand better the message. Well, sometimes we are listeners, and this is focused on interaction and the ability to respond appropriately. So it is focused on accuracy and fluency. Well, at the moment we listen, we are going to check that there are many purposes to understand it or to pay attention with the message. It could be to get information, to socialize, to be entertained, or to be communicate. Well, in some situations there may be interference or background noise. That ability it is focused on when we are listening without any picture or something visual resource in order that we could infer what is the meaning. Only we are listening, but there are many uh, factors that could influence in our comprehension. Finally, the people involved, the people who is in the communicative process could be a key to understand. Uh, it could relate it with when we are watching some movies, some TV programs, or in front or face to face someone. So it was the last one about the visual element that I was talking about. Um, it is with keywords that help us to understand better the message. Well, to continue with that, we're going to check we are going to organize in principles. The first one, we are going to check the similarities and the differences. Well, Sean mentioned that refers to the untidy aspects of the listening and be a parallel between spoken and, and written English. So we're going to check that there are some untidy aspects that could influence or spoken. For example, it could be pronunciation, irregular pauses, false starts, hesitation, like etc. Self-revision and backtracking. So, talking about listening and speaking, we are going to check that those ones are in a common process, but we are going to check that listening and reading are focused on the next one process. About hearing, listening is focused on hearing and reading in seeing. So both try to understand better the message. So according with the differences, we're going to check that there are different headings like communicative medium, which talk about the separation, and the production factor, that it is focused more on the listener hears in the reception stage of listening. Well, we are going to check that there are some differences between dynamic and synoptic, that's Rose mentioned us, and where the listener has different roles according to the situation, as only a listener, or maybe like a part of the interaction. But it is going to depends on the listener needs to be part of the process. Well, Richard mentioned that there is a listening medium factor, but he tries to do it a little bit shorter. For this reason, he only focused on some important keys. Well, we are going to check that there are production factors in this case. He only summarizes in 7 factors, which those ones are casual basis of speech, reduced forms, grammatical forms, pausing, and speech errors, rate of delivery, rhythm and stress, and cohesive basis. Well, the first one, it is focused on how is spoken the language. It said that when is spoken the language is one clause at a time, and the reduced forms, it is focused on the position of the consonants and vowels could be affected depending on the way that it is taught. About grammatical forms, it is focused that grammaticality is not of relevant. It's a little bit not considered in this time. Pausing and speech errors, it is focused more on the how pauses and hesitation could be present as a natural speech. Well, Sanchez says before that intonation is crucial. Why? Because according that how the speaker said the message, the listener could understand better the interaction or message that it is mentioned during the in the interaction or the speaking. Well, right at the delivery, it mentioned about who is the fast speaker and who is the less speaker or a slow speaker. Well, the rhythm and the stress mentioned that in English is considered an stress time language. So it said that only particular syllables are stressed, but the utterance must accommodate to the rhythm. So the currency is going to give you the rhythm of the sentences. Cohesive devices, it is focused on the discourse markers used in spoken discourse are different from this. So in the next one, processing sound, meaning, and response. Well, it mentioned that the listener has to develop many micro skills. So it mentioned that the interpretation process is a key in this skill. So it give us as an example that listening is a complex process that will requires an organization in order to could improve. Well, we are going to consider schema theory, which is going to help us to link our knowledge to interpret what we heard. Well, it is focused on the proposition. It is considered as a basic unit of any meaning, and it considers the syntactic knowledge. Well, we're going to check that in the hierarchy. In the listening process, we're going to have this order, like the first one is reception, the second one is interpretation, and the third one is response. Well, first McGregor mentioned us that the listener response has different roles, and we're going to check the roles of the listening in this diagram. Well, we're going to have 5 examples. The first one is participant, auditor, address, overhearer, or huge. In the role of participle, it speaks directly and it writes equal to others involved in the discourse. It could be considered in a conversation with a friend on a topic, but in mutual order. When we are talking about address, well, the spoke is directly, but the rights are limited to response. We are going to check, for example, in a situation when a student in the class could be an example. Auditor, it is a member of the audience and it has very limited rights to respond. So we could check that. Could be like a bus driver with the passengers, that the passenger is the audience and the bus driver who is announcing the name of the text, for example. Overhearer, it is not being addressed and has no right to respond. So we could check that could be about hearing a conversation of a bank teller, a customer, etc. So, and the last one, sorry, judged. It is not being spoken, but evaluate the speaker. Could be only a juror. It could be a great example. So, to continue, we're going to check that. Richard mentioned us a hierarchical summary of listening process, that interaction, scripts, calls, utterances, illocutionary information. Well, the first one is focus on the type of interaction and how is a speech event. The second one, the script, what is relevant and what could be recalled. The goals, how are inferred to reference, and the situation. Utterance could be that how the proportional could provide of meaning and how it is determined. Illocutionary, meaning to the message, and finally the information. How it is retained, how could be acted, and how it could be formed and deleted. So the next one, classroom consideration. When we are going to check listening in the classroom, we are going to check that listening skill has to consider individual preferences per subject, topic, authenticity, input factor. Authenticity, it focuses on what kind of listening our students are going to practice or develop, because as mentioned Paulson, students usually have trouble understanding people outside the classroom. It gives you or it explains that when students are in the class, they develop or they understand a kind of English, but when they are outside, they have many problems about understand the people who talk in a native language. So we are going to check that Penny or suggests that it is necessary to apply or to practice a real life listening, because it is going to help us to provide to the learner to understand better the listening in a real life, giving environmental cues, short chunks. It requires or it helps us to have reciprocity and response. Another one, well, when we are talking about this kind of authenticity or focus, there were many authors that who were not agree about that, because they mentioned that it is not essential pay attention on what kind of listening students are paying attention. Is prefers to consider the phonological feature as the basis of international communication. And it mentioned Jenkins, and for the reason the simplification was considered as a strategy, but in lower levels, although it deprives the learner of making sense of what they heard. Well, some activities that we could consider in the listening process could be pre-listening, while listening, and post-listening. And there are some examples here. about what kind of activities we could consider during the listening practice. Well, finally, integrating listening, we are going to check that listening occurs in relation to speaking. This is true. We doesn't tell us or say that a spoken text is to respond using listening as a preparation for a response. Listening uses as a part of communication. So we don't have to forget the role of the listening in the communicative process. It is a necessary skill to develop and to be focused on this one. Listening based on a tape monologue or dialogue with body language and facial expression. Sometimes when we are listening, we could be conscious or help us with the body language and facial expression in order that we could understand better the message. Well, some conclusions are these ones. First of all, the text selection depends on directly of what kind of students we have. The role of the learner changes according to the skill. The schema theory has an important relationship with the skill listening because it shows how the listener could change during the conversation. The kind of listening used in the learning process will provide a general view about the real life. There are three kinds of activities in the listening process: pre, while, and post. Those ones are the references of this topic. Thank you so much and have a good day.